I'm just going to go under last name.
In 2011, Marion Hollingsworth needed to get a colonoscopy. Her primary care doctor referred her to a gastroenterologist who performed the procedure. Everything was A-OK. A few years later, Hollingsworth learned how to research doctors on the California Medical Board's website. She decided to check the records of the doctor who did her colonoscopy.
And I about fell over because he was about to start a 30-day suspension and 7 years probation for a decades-long history of drug and alcohol abuse. But what finally got the attention of the medical board was that he went after a patient with a hatchet.
Hollingsworth discovered that the medical board had investigated this doctor before.
In the early 2000s, he was recommended for the medical board's diversion program they had at that time. And he had failed some other diversion programs he had tried voluntarily. He also failed the medical board version, and nothing was ever done.
Any disciplinary action taken against a physician in California is listed on the medical board's website. But the website isn't exactly user-friendly. For example, Hollingsworth takes us through a search of one doctor's public records.
You would click on here to see what he did to get the public reprimand. Here, for the 5 years probation, you have to click there. You have to know to click here.
And then she checks the records of another physician.
After 20 pages, we finally get to the accusation. And so now we have to scroll down through the accusation, a number of other pages to the conviction for DUI.
But even if a doctor is punished for being drunk on the job, they're not required to tell patients about it. A bill in the state legislature would have changed that. It would have required doctors to notify patients in writing if the medical board put them on probation for a serious offense, like sexual misconduct with a patient or operating under the influence of drugs. The California Medical Association said no way, and it lobbied to kill the bill. The CMA did not agree to be interviewed for this story. In a written statement, a spokeswoman said such patient notification would erode the fundamental right to due process by basing notification on accusations rather than a finding of fact.
I really think that argument is just patently false.
Bridget Grammy directs the Center for Public Interest Law at the University of San Diego.
Anyone that's on probation has either stipulated with the medical board that they did commit the conduct that they're being accused of, or that the board could at least prove its case, or at least certain elements of its case.
Grammy says the CMA is dead wrong on this one.
I think they're trying to make it sound like there's a good reason, but I don't think they have a good reason. They just don't want to have to tell their patients because it would harm their business and it would be embarrassing, and that's just not a good enough reason.
There are an estimated 137,000 licensed physicians in California. Each year, on average, the medical board puts 124 doctors on probation. The failed bill would have applied to a subset of those doctors, some 40 a year. In other words, the CMA helped kill a measure that would have affected about 0.02% of all doctors in the state. San Diego physician Jeffrey Gordon has a unique perspective. He not only spent 35 years in private practice, but he also served on the state's medical board for 8 years back in the 70s. Gordon says the board has an obligation to protect patients from bad doctors.
And to put their names on our website is not adequate. I think each physician ought to be responsible for notifying his patients that he's not been morally responsible.
Marion Hollingsworth has become a crusader for more public disclosure. The bottom line, she thinks the medical board doesn't have its priorities straight.
Like the investigator in my case actually told me that it's the medical board's job to make sure the doctors remain in practice for as long as possible. And I said, well, I thought it was to protect patients. And she goes, oh, that too.
Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.